Welcome to SF Commercial Property Conversations with Bruce Bean, where Bay Area investments meet expert insights. Get ready to unlock the strategies of commercial real estate success.
Okay, today we have Nick Arenson with us, and Nick is in the home building world. He started with Walt Disney and he went through Berkeley. So Nick, it's great to have you. If you can give us a few more details about your history and how you got to where you are, that would be great.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the time. I say, Walt Disney, I went to Berkeley, and then I actually started off in engineering prior to Disney and doing a number of big projects, bridges and buildings and that kind of thing, and went on to Disney. And after Disney ended, I got into heavy California entitlements for Coastal Commission and other kinds of entitlements, doing master plan communities, and then working for publicly traded home builders who acquired, I think, one of my biggest projects ever. And I stayed with them for a solid 10 years, took a little sabbatical where I took off and traveled the world for a year with my family and came back and kept going with publicly traded home builders. And then recently I broke off and connected up with Mountain House developers and Altamont Development and started a home building company on their behalf as the home building arm of their master plan out here in Mountain House, California. And also I'm with 330 Land Company, and we identify and acquire and entitle kind of complex projects in the Bay Area and reposition them, and often work with banks and hedge funds and those kind of folks, but other just normal land sellers as well, to get projects entitled and sell to home builders.
Wow. All right. So give me a little clue of one project you're working on now.
Right now I'm working on, obviously in Mountain House, we have 6,000 lots, and I've got 3 subdivisions open. We're opening up another one probably early next year. And we stake out the high end of every segment in our market, mainly because we're the master developer. But also I've got a project in Lafayette, and I've got one in Windsor, California, and we're doing entitlements on those as well. And they're just going through the process, and really SB 330 and all the new spate of housing laws that change a little bit of the calculus of what planners can and can't do and how much latitude they have, and gives developers a little bit more cleaner shot at developing projects and entitling them in ways that are marketable, to bring more housing out there to alleviate our housing crisis.
Well, it sounds like you have decoded the California entitlement process, or at least you are so familiar with it that you can make it work a little more quickly than the normal approach.
Decoding, I don't know. I think I understand it.
There is no decoding it.
There's some decoding. I think a lot of the new laws have done things. There are a lot of top line things in the entitlement process and in codes and backpacks and those kind of things that were never really meant to stop development, that were never really meant to fully regulate it, as much as just sort of just section it off and make it make sense. But over time, people have used a lot of those things in all sorts of different ways, both bureaucratic and political and legislative, to actually stop development that weren't necessarily initially intended, or not intended by everybody. And some of the new laws are at least to some extent undoing some of the unforeseen consequences of some of the past things that have happened. So you're exempt on CEQA for smaller parcels, and you have streamlined processes, and they can't ask for infinite numbers of hearings and those kind of things. Things that really were never initially intended, but sort of grew as staffs were trying to satisfy city managers, who were trying to satisfy politicians who often adopted anti-growth mindsets.
So I'm curious, obviously you've run into NIMBYs over the years. So have you figured out a way to work with the local communities that kind of helps move things forward more quickly?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the nature of the NIMBY. I mean, most NIMBYs will come up and invariably say, I'm not against projects per se, and then they'll go on to rant about your particular project, but I think they do that on every project. And so it's just about understanding kind of where they're coming from. And most people, if they feel like they can keep the status quo is very comfortable for a lot of people. And change is hard. New people are hard. Not having control is hard for people. And with California entitlements and the structure of the rules and the path, it lets people kind of have some control. And I think they want that. And it lets them, if they're afraid of change, it lets them not have change. And so I think those are some of the ability of people to stop projects speaks to some deeper truths within people about just democracy and how to control your environment. And so I think it brings people out. There are ways to bring them along and get enough of them to come along that obviously have been successful, but it's always a challenge.
So have you had to scale back some of your projects just to satisfy the local community?
Scale back or change. Sometimes I think if you do a good job of understanding what the community is going to want, it helps. But sometimes what the community really wants nothing. And so there's no real way to scale back a project to nothing. So in that case, what I really try and do, the people who are against things are often really vocal. The people who are for things, well, they're often pretty silent. And
Right.
so what I try and do is try and identify and mobilize people who are for stuff, because there's actually a lot of them out there. And so when I go to a hearing and there's 10 people out there saying, say no to this, I try and have 20 people over there saying, well, no, that's a really good thing, to give city councils a little bit more support, to say that negative voice is just a voice and not necessarily the overall voice, and to give them some more confidence that they can vote yes on a project and feel good about it. It's good for the community.
Are you in a situation where you have to use union construction?
Sometimes, in some places, on some projects, it really varies from location to location, project to project, project type to project type. So it just depends.
And I assume you try and cater to environmental needs as much as you can, or what happens in that category?
Well, I mean, there's a few different. The word environmental is one of the big overarching words that people use, and often people use it and say, "Hey, it's not good for the environment. It should stop." But really, there's a bunch of different pieces of that. There's biological resources. There's traffic, and traffic isn't really environmental in the traditional sense of clean water and clean air and those kind of things. And to some extent, traffic can be, but it's just more about impacting just daily lives of people. And so, depending on, all projects are going to have an impact. It's interesting though, there's an impact of not doing projects. For instance, if you say no to all projects in the Core Bay area, and growth happens and it comes out to the Central Valley, well, there's more traffic impact. There's more air impacts because people are driving farther. So there's impacts to not doing projects as well.
So I assume that traffic is the number one issue that comes up with most folks.
It really depends. So there's the people who are against projects at all costs, and they're trying to find every possible way to say no to a project. So they're just going to go through the codes and go through every single thing there is and make as big an issue of it as they can to try and create as much friction as possible to stop the entitlement. And then there's just the practical people of, hey, there are going to be more cars on the road in front of my house on my way to the freeway. Our school is going to be impacted. Our service is going to be limited. Those are a lot easier to actually deal with and manage and have plans to come up with things to mitigate those kind of problems. The people who are against projects at all costs, well, they're just against projects at all costs.
So I am curious, what happens? Have you ever had to build schools, or what happens with the school related situation?
We often fund schools, so it depends on the school situation. So prior to, I think it was the late 90s, there was really this unknown as to how to fund the school construction. And what was happening was school districts were coming to developers saying, hey, you've got to build the whole school in order to do your project. And often projects are too small to afford a multi-million-dollar construction that you're only impacting a little bit, and only for a certain period of time until other projects come online. And so back in the late 90s, it came up with a program called SB 50, was a Senate bill that really set forward how school funding would take place and how the state would participate, and how local jurisdictions would participate, and how developers would pay fees. So the school funding picture is pretty well established. It's really more a matter of the timing. Sometimes schools have a weird problem where they need the money before it's coming in. And so often developers will front costs for them through various different agreements that to help them with their cash flow, because the state, once a bond is passed, can then pay their share. Local bonds can pay their share, but often there's sort of a gap in funding. So here at Mountain House, we fund them through community facilities districts and those kind of things. So they're bonds that we sell and homeowners pay for it. So it's all part of the infrastructure, like any other infrastructure that you need, roads, sewer plants and water plants and those kind of things. Schools are just a piece of infrastructure that are really necessary for quality of life.
So I assume early on in the planning stage, you start to figure out how much infrastructure you're going to need for a particular development.
Yeah, I mean, small developments incrementally have very little impact, and most cities have fee programs and have already set up how much the share of every piece of facility there is. So it becomes pretty easy at that point to say, oh, I'm going to pay this much in fees, I'm going to build these certain improvements, and I'm going to contribute over here. And those kind of normal kind of business impacts are really, really well established generally. When you do very large projects, like here at Mountain House, it's the last 6,000 lots of a 16,000 lot community. Enormous master plans were done for that. There's a lot of pre-planning in that respect. And so that takes a lot more of a heavy lift because nothing is there when you start.
So I'm curious, how close are employment situations to Mountain House? Are people commuting?
People are often commuting. Mountain House has been a place where even before the pandemic, people were on flex schedules, and we're really the first city outside of Livermore. So when you're in the Bay Area, Mountain House's borders on Alameda County. So if I take one wrong step in Mountain House, I'm in Alameda County. So we're just outside of Livermore. We're the first city you really hit past Livermore, and a lot of commuters to the Tri-Valley area, Dublin, Livermore, Pleasanton, San Ramon area. There's certainly people going down to Fremont, Sunnyvale, Mountain View, Cupertino, those kind of areas. And people really drawn here to schools, quality of life, big parks, wide avenues, those kind of things.
Yeah. So there, and then pandemic hit and a lot of people are just working remotely. So was there a boom when that happened, or what was the situation before and after the pandemic?
Well, Mountain House in particular, but really all of the areas where there's just a little bit more space, Sacramento, Solano County, East Contra Costa County, Mountain House, really all of the commute markets exploded during COVID. And initially during COVID, as builders, we were all really concerned because, unemployment was high and no one knew what was going to happen with the economy. And so we didn't know what was going to happen even with our ability to build. And when the governor came out and said, housing is an essential business because people are sheltering in place, you need shelter. Right. And so that kind of let us keep going. And it was an extraordinary boom because it's okay when you're living in an urban area or a dense suburban area and you have a 2-bedroom apartment and a child and they have schools nearby and parks nearby and restaurants nearby. That's an okay lifestyle. When the pandemic hit, all those people said, we're now working here. We're going to school in our house. We have everybody staying there. So a lot of people went out to the farther out suburbs to find some more space to be able to really kind of function. And it stands to reason there'd be a boom. Shelter during shelter in place. Shelter is the prime thing you want to have. So it makes a lot of sense.
So given all that, now that the pandemic's basically over, has the mountain or the housing market kind of cooled off? What's the current condition now?
Well, after the pandemic and the ultra low interest rates, what ended up happening was the resale market really stalled because no one wanted to sell their house because they're sitting on a 2.75% mortgage. And so where you're going to go, you can't really replace that. So there's very little resale inventory. So the new inventory in these suburban markets kind of held up and the volume really held up, even though interest rates had increased pretty dramatically. But it's rate sensitive. And so obviously with kind of global stuff going on, rates are all over the place. But it's certainly slower than during the pandemic, but the pandemic was one of the biggest booms ever. So it's slowed down some since then, but it's stabilizing. So it's almost as though you can just forget everything from 2020 to 2025 and think of 2026 as just the year after 2019 in the normal sense of things of people came out here before and there were great schools and it's a little bit longer of a commute and there's still jobs here and jobs somewhat nearby and jobs further out and in Mountain House or a place like Mountain House, you can get a house for 40% less than you get it in a similar house and you get in Dublin, just 25 miles away. So that's the Mountain House story. For other types of projects that I'm entitling in the Core Bay, the closer in they are and the more traditionally laid out they are, the more demand there is.
So what's your crystal ball saying about the future? Or can you make any, given the events in the world, any thoughts about what the future might bring?
In terms of future changes to the market or changes in demand, or what kind of change?
All of the above. Any thoughts you have either way?
Well, an interesting thing happening right now, which I didn't really foresee, and I'm seeing in reports across the country, and when I talk to my counterparts in other states, and definitely here, definitely Southern California as well, is there's a huge demand for entry-level housing. And that's always been the case, and it hasn't really changed, and it makes a ton of sense. The surprising thing is normally as you go up the price scale, there's thinning demand and thinning supply because it's just more and more expensive and fewer people can afford it. What we're seeing now is as you normally go up the price scale, there's thinning demand and thinning supply. But when you get to the top end and the most expensive, the biggest, most luxurious houses, homes, condos, whatever it might be, there's all of a sudden an increased demand for that. So in Mountain House, I sell more $1.3 million houses than I sell $950,000 houses, even though I have equivalent numbers available. So I think it could be an effect of a wealth transfer from baby boomers. It could be an effect of, even though there are a lot of people struggling, the absolute number of people who are making or have a lot of money and a lot of equity is a huge number. And at some point, the pandemic is over, and you want what you want, and you want to live your lifestyle in your home. And so we're seeing a much larger than expected demand at the very top of our market. And we're even seeing it in other markets in the Bay Area. So the $3 million houses in Dublin are maybe selling faster than the $1.3 million townhouses, which historically hasn't been the case.
That is very interesting, huh? Going to have to think about and study that idea, but it sort of makes sense that the people that have money want to continue to expand their home and so forth, and so they're buying bigger homes. But
they're also not rate sensitive. So when rates go up or rates go down, they're typically coming with large down payments, and their back end ratios aren't bad, and they have banking relationships to get better rates because they have their 401ks in place, and they have their IRAs someplace, and they have so there's just a lot more resources they're pulling on. And new homes in California are still a very small segment of the economy, and it's the most premium segment. It's the newest product. There's no maintenance you have to do. They're warranty things, and so when people are buying new homes, it is really a kind of a somewhat separate market that we sell.
So I'm curious how quickly you can shift in terms of trying to follow the trends. For example, making or building more expensive homes.
It's not as quick as I'd like.
Yeah,
and it's quicker for me because we are the master developer. So I can look out over a field of lots, and there's lots of big map right behind me, and say, okay, we'll go do village, I-2 or I-7 or whatever it might be, because it has bigger lots. And so we'll do that one next, and then I'll plan a product for it. If you're a builder out in the open market, you can certainly target those kinds of things, but entitlement processes are typically years long. And so what's available on the open market for a home builder, a publicly traded home builder who might want to buy something, is really what people have been planning for the past 2 or 3 years. But also, those home builders tend to want to normalize their national platform. So they have certain houses that are designed across the country of certain sizes and widths and depths and square footages. So I think it's harder for them to pivot to a completely different market segment. For me, well, I tailor my homes for the particular market, the particular age demographic, ethnic demographic, job class demographic. So if somebody in my group of people that wants to live out here, if a bunch of them want prayer rooms or craft rooms or a third car garage or whatever it might be, I can tailor my home really easily to satisfy that group, which gives me a little bit of an advantage.
That's interesting. But I think what you're saying is that for a larger developer, you have different segments or different parcels that you can kind of shift and go and develop depending on what the market is doing at that particular time.
I can do that when I go on the 330 land side. I go and title projects in the Core Bay area, and I'm doing kind of a reuse of a project and maybe doing 50 or 100 units someplace. Then I'm more constrained with what that particular market really, what the builders who will buy in that particular market will buy, what's marketable to them. Because my real customer, when I'm just doing land development and entitlement, is really a national home builder. Whereas when I'm here in Mountain House, I sell lots. We sell lots of lots to the national home builders, but we also build homes, and so it's a lot more varied.
So I'm curious, are there situations where a customer will come in and say, I want this house, and you can go build it for them?
Well, I mean, I have a set of houses I'm building.
Yeah.
So I can say, hey, what most home builders do now is they'll do a release. They'll say, hey, the next 4 lots are available, 10 lots, or whatever it might be. Pick one of those and we'll sell that to you. For me, if someone's going to want to buy in a later phase, I have that flexibility. If they want me to change to a different house on a different lot, I have more flexibility. Theoretically, other builders do too, but there's a hit to your efficiency when you do that. It's not as streamlined. Mistakes can get made. So a lot of the national builders try and avoid that. And it makes a ton of sense why they avoid it. It is a tax on the system, but it just depends on what segment of the market you're appealing to, and I'm appealing to the most premium point of any various different segment. So even at the low end, I'm the most premium point of the smallest houses. Or so at that point, I'm giving you better finishes. I'm giving you a nicer looking house. I'm giving you some more choice. I'm giving you some more options. So that's just a marketing strategy, and there's something to be said for the more traditional way of doing it as well.
I assume most buyers, it'd be interesting, most buyers come in and say, okay, this is the house I want. I'll take this house. It's fine. Some people may come in and say, well, okay, I like this house, but I want to change the paint color or something on the inside. How much of customization happens in that situation?
Well, I mean, it depends on how far along the house is. So if the house isn't built yet and somebody wants different counters, well, give them whatever counters they want. Right? If the house is already built and I have to take out the counters and put a different counter in, obviously much bigger issue. So it depends on how. The answer always is depends on how badly they want it and how much they want it.
Hey, so anything's possible. It just costs more.
Anything's possible. It just costs more.
That's great. Well, this has been very interesting conversation. I want to see what's going to happen in 3 to 6 months in this whole crazy world of housing. I'd love to talk to you again down the road here.
Oh, sure. That'd be great. Yeah. One time I was having a tough time. I think it was in 09 or 10 or whatever it was. And things were bleak at that point because of the Great Recession. And I remember my boss at the time telling me, don't worry, Nick. The home building business changes completely every 18 months. And so it's just a short-term thing and we'll figure it out.
Wow. I'm thinking the cycle is 7 years, but you're saying it's 18 months.
Well, when you're at a builder, the cycle might be 7 years, but what you are doing, what your management's pushing you to do, what kind of land you're looking for, what position you want, what product you're doing, the people around you, your boss's boss, all those things, it's a pretty dynamic kind of industry. So things change.
Wow. Okay. Well, it sounds like we need to talk again then in 3 to 6 months just to see what the cycle's doing then.
Absolutely. I love it.
All right. Well, this has been very intriguing. Where can people get a hold of you, Nick?
My email address is narenson@330land.com, or I can also be reached at nick.arenson@rurkahomes.com. That's RURKAHOMES.com.
That's a wrap on today's journey through the SF commercial real estate scene. Ready to share your story? Visit sfcommercialconversations.com/guest. Your insights could lead the next conversation.